Now, more than 90 trucks carrying aid for Palestinians in Gaza have been collected by UN teams in the territory, and they're expected to be distributed. That's 3 days after Israel lifted an 11-week total blockade on aid deliveries. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected international criticism about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Well, for more, let's speak to our correspondent Wira Davies, who's at the Kerem Shalom border crossing. Wira, some aid getting through, but from all that we're hearing from aid agencies, clearly still not enough to meet the needs of what is a very dire humanitarian situation.
Yeah, many UN agencies, including the World Food Programme, are talking about the 2.1 million people in Gaza who are at risk of famine. Starvation is directly affecting about a quarter of the population, says the WFP. And they're been trying to get more aid in, of course, after that 11-week-long Israeli blockade. Now, Israel partially lifted that blockade earlier this week. And today we've seen several trucks coming in carrying mainly flour. There's been an agreement by the Israeli government, after criticism from the Americans and others, to allow very basic food materials in. The problem in the last couple of days, though, even though about 90 trucks had crossed the border, is that they weren't able to be picked up on the other side by Palestinian drivers, largely because of the security situation. The UN had told us that they didn't feel happy with the route that the Israeli army wanted them to take through populous areas where looting and theft by armed gangs would be a real issue, especially with so little aid getting through. What the UN has been saying is that you almost need to flood Gaza with aid, so it drives away that insecurity, it drives down the black market prices for things like flour and sugar and milk. But at the minute, only about 90 trucks have got through, but they have fortunately been able to clear the problems on the other side of the border, and most of that flour has now been taken to warehouses and bakeries in Gaza, where, you know, some of those starving people can start to get some of the very basic food they need. But as we've been hearing all week from various agencies, when you take the lack of medicines, the lack of fuel for desalination plants, and the lack of fresh food, about 600 trucks a day are needed. Well, what we're seeing now is at most about 90 trucks a day. And it is really in dribs and drabs.
Just very briefly, just remind us what's happening on the ground in terms of that ongoing offensive.
Yeah, well, all morning we've been hearing the booms of Israeli airstrikes and Israeli artillery fire here. That Israeli military action has been stepped up. 30 people killed in Gaza reportedly in the last few hours, and more than 600 since this Israeli military offensive was really stepped up. So yeah, Israel's military action very much continuing.
OK, Wira Davies at the Kerem Shalom border crossing. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date on the ongoing aid situation in Gaza.